Did you just slap? Her gasps echoed through first class like turbulence, sharp, sudden, disbelieving. Flight attendant Samantha Chen's palm still hovered mid-air, the shock of what she'd done flickering across her face too late. In seat 2A, Dr. Aaliyah Richardson slowly turned her head back toward the woman who had just struck her across the cheek. She didn't cry out. She didn't shout. She simply stared. The hush was complete. Businessmen froze. Coffee cups mid-air. Phones began to rise. A child in 3A whispered, "Mommy, what happened?" Security stormed the cabin. Samantha tried to speak, to justify, but her voice, so confident moments ago, was now brittle with fear, because what she didn't know was this. The woman she slapped wasn't just a passenger. She wasn't just another first-class traveler with an elegant scarf and calm eyes. She owned the airline, and in less than 48 hours, Samantha would be unemployed, under federal investigation, and the face of a scandal that would spark industry-wide reform. This wasn't just a story of rage. It was about reckoning. Before we dive into this real-life twist of justice and power, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what happens next. The story truly began not in the moment of impact, but in the slow, seeping humiliation that came long before the slap, before the investigation, before Samantha's name trended worldwide. It started with a look, a pause, a hesitation masked as procedure. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, 7:16 a.m. The terminal buzzed with the usual chaos of early morning flights. Businessmen sipped espresso while texting clients. Families corralled toddlers near charging stations. And among them, Dr. Aaliyah Richardson. 42 quietly approached Gate B12, her Louboutin heels clicking a calm rhythm across the marble floor. She was dressed simply but elegantly. Silk scarf, tailored navy blazer, natural curls pinned back. Boarding pass in hand, seat 2A, first class. Unseen. Beneath the surface, she wasn't just another well-dressed traveler. She was incognito, conducting one of her unannounced inspections of Meridian Airlines, the very airline she owned. But as she approached the jet bridge, her path was cut off by a single-body flight attendant, Samantha Chen. "Excuse me, ma'am," Samantha said flatly. "First class, boarding only." Aaliyah smiled politely, offering her boarding pass. Samantha didn't look. Not yet. She looked at Aaliyah's skin. Then her eyes dropped to the boarding pass, which she took like it might burn her fingers. A pause. Then the first cut. "I'm going to need to see your ID as well." Aaliyah blinked. Of course. She reached into her purse calmly, passing over her California driver's license. Samantha studied it with exaggerated scrutiny, flipping it, holding it to the light, as if expecting it to disappear. California. Huh, Samantha muttered, half to herself. Long way from home. "I travel often for business," Aaliyah replied smoothly. Samantha looked up, eyes scanning Aaliyah again like a TSA scanner set to bias. She handed back the documents with reluctant fingers. Her lips curled in a polite but forced smile. "Just making sure. We've had incidents." Then she stepped aside, but not before adding, "I'll be keeping an eye on you." Inside the cabin, the double standards revealed themselves like cracks in a glass pane. Aaliyah moved toward her seat, Tove window side, and settled in. Samantha, now in full hospitality mode, greeted the next passengers with warmth and professionalism. The white man behind Aaliyah received assistance with his luggage. The older white woman across the aisle got 2 drink options and a Welcome back. Miss Hartley. No one else had to show ID. No one else had been intercepted at the gate. Aaliyah pulled out her sleek leather notebook and began making notes quietly, observing, logging, documenting. Because this wasn't the first time she'd seen it, but it would be the last. 30 minutes later, the aircraft was mid-climb. Beverage service underway. Aaliyah opened her laptop and began reviewing quarterly reports. The data matched what she was now witnessing. First-hand customer complaints were rising, especially among Black and brown passengers. She had come today to investigate, and now she had names. Samantha reappeared with a tray and offered drinks, skipping Aaliyah completely. Seconds later, she returned and leaned in, voice sharp enough to slice silence. "We've had some concerns," she said too loudly, ensuring other passengers could hear. "About your behavior." Aaliyah looked up, startled. "What behavior? You've been watching the crew, taking notes, typing constantly. It's making some people nervous. Typing, taking notes, working, like 100 other passengers on 100 other flights." "I'm working," Aaliyah replied. "Is that a problem?" Samantha's voice dropped to a hiss. "You're not entitled to act suspicious and expect no consequences." Aaliyah's eyebrows rose. Suspicious. For typing a beat of silence. Then the line. Samantha never should have said, "This is first class, not public transportation. You people always push limits." That was it. The entire first-class cabin fell silent. A businessman in 1B stared. A young woman in 3A began typing on her phone. Samantha realized her mistake, but only barely. "Watch your tone," Aaliyah said evenly. Voice steel beneath silk. Samantha scoffed. "Don't threaten me." "I'm not," Aaliyah said, her voice now low. "But you should know that everything you've done since the gate has been logged." Samantha leaned closer, furious now. "What are you, some kind of lawyer?" "No," Aaliyah said, slowly closing her laptop. Worse. Climax moment. The cabin buzzed with tension. Aaliyah turned slowly toward Samantha, holding her gaze. "I own this airline." The words were whispered, not for drama, but because truth doesn't need volume. Samantha froze. Passengers behind them shifted. One man whispered, "Wait." "What?" But Samantha wasn't ready to believe it. She stepped back as if bitten. "You're bluffing," she hissed. Aaliyah didn't respond. She just reached into her purse and quietly tapped a single button on her phone. No sound, no alert. But that silent tap had just triggered a secure chain reaction. Internal logs, time-stamped footage, automatic legal flagging. The system Aaliyah herself had designed to audit discrimination was now watching live. Samantha didn't know it yet, but she had just stepped into her own downfall, and the whole plane was the courtroom. Samantha stormed down the aisle, fists clenched, heat rushing to her face like a pressure valve ready to blow. The woman, no. The passenger had claimed she owned the airline. Ridiculous. Impossible. She was bluffing. Probably rich. Probably entitled. But there's no way someone like her ran anything, Samantha told herself. She reached the galley, ripped off a glove, and jabbed at the intercom. "Captain Hayes," she snapped. "I need to speak with you immediately. Security matter." From the cockpit, a confused voice crackled back. "Copy that. We're at cruising altitude. What's the nature of the issue?" Samantha hesitated. What was she going to say? "A black woman in first class hurt my ego." Instead, she reached for vagueness. Possible seat misassignment passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions. Potential threat. That last word threat hung dangerously in the air. Captain Hayes sighed. Bring your lead and document everything. We're not rerouting without proper cause. Samantha clicked off and turned to the only person she knew wouldn't fight her Marcus Thompson. Senior attendant. But even Marcus was growing cautious. You're escalating this, he warned softly. That woman hasn't done a thing wrong. You're taking her side. Samantha hissed. I'm taking the airline's side. Marcus replied. But that was the problem, because unknown to Marcus, the airline's side was her side. Meanwhile, in seat 2A, Aaliyah stayed still. The tension in the cabin had cooled only slightly. Passengers were whispering now. One man opened a notes app. A young woman across the aisle had already uploaded something to Instagram captioned, "Flight drama brewing in first-class Meridian Airlines." Aaliyah didn't check. She didn't flinch. Instead, she opened her encrypted app. Inside was a secure dashboard, live linked to the Meridian Airlines Executive Response System, or MERS, a private back-channel tool designed for internal crisis documentation, whistleblower incidents, and management escalation. A tool Aaliyah had commissioned herself when she acquired the airline through Shell Trusts 3 years ago. She tapped the Flight MA447 marker. Recording enabled. Cabin audio link engaged. Flagged tags. Discrimination. Passenger mistreatment. Code Delta Red. Back in the galley. Samantha leaned against the service cart, her thoughts unraveling. What if that woman wasn't bluffing? No, couldn't be. She hadn't looked like someone powerful. She didn't have an entourage. She didn't throw names around. She was too calm, too quiet, too composed. Exactly the kind of person who'd earned their way up, not inherited it. That's what scared Samantha the most, because people who earned power never gave it up quietly. 20 minutes passed. Turbulence shook the cabin slightly, and the seatbelt sign came on. Samantha returned, flanked by Marcus, her mouth set in a forced smile. "Dr. Richardson," she said mockingly, as if testing Aaliyah's name for weakness. "We've reviewed the situation and still have some concerns. You're taking unauthorized photographs, recording the crew. That's a federal offense." Marcus winced. Aaliyah stayed calm. "I haven't recorded anyone. I've taken notes of what I've experienced as a customer." "Well, that's your version of it," Samantha replied sharply. "But it's disruptive. I'm asking you to move to economy." Aaliyah blinked once. Slowly, deliberately. "No." Samantha stiffened. "I paid for this seat. I have documentation. You've seen it. This demand is discriminatory, and if enforced, will trigger consequences for you and for Meridian." Marcus tried to step in. "Samantha, let's not. I'm invoking policy," she barked, her voice rising. "This passenger is non-compliant." That was it. The trigger. Climax moment. From behind Aaliyah, a voice spoke calm, authoritative, and unfamiliar. "Excuse me. I'm Agent Foster, Federal Air Marshal." Everyone froze. A man in a dark blazer stood 2 rows back, badge already in hand. "I've been observing this flight. There's been no disruptive behavior, but I've observed crew misconduct. This is a formal advisory. Stand down." Samantha's face went white. Marcus backed away. Aaliyah, silent, closed her notebook, leaned back, and whispered, "You've just escalated this to federal attention. I suggest you sit down before you lose more than your job." Samantha opened her mouth, but no words came out. The entire cabin was watching now. Not one person looked confused. They knew. Something powerful had just shifted in the air, and the woman in seat 2A. She wasn't bluffing. She was about to show everyone how power moves in silence, in systems, and in truth, that leaves no one untouched. For a moment, it seemed like the storm had passed. Samantha Chen disappeared to the galley. Marcus lingered near row 3, silently scanning the cabin for signs of further fallout. Agent Foster, now quietly seated in 4D, tapped a few notes into his tablet and pulled a discreet earpiece from his inner pocket. Meanwhile, Aaliyah Richardson stared out the window. Her reflection blinked back at her in the curved glass, serene, contained, but simmering. She had always known power wasn't loud. It didn't wear flashy watches or raise its voice. True power carried stillness like a blade in velvet. But beneath the silence, the fire was building. She reopened her dashboard. Internal systems were already alerting 2 departments' legal and media risk analysis. Her assistant, Jennifer Walsh, had texted 3 words. "Want me ready?" Aaliyah typed back. "Not yet. Stand by." This was still salvageable if Samantha pulled back, if the airline responded swiftly, if some remnant of professional judgment prevailed. But it didn't. Because in the galley, Samantha wasn't backing down. She's manipulating everyone. Samantha paced in tight circles, her voice low but furious. She vented to Tara, a junior attendant who stood motionless beside the beverage cart. You saw her attitude. She's not acting normal. She's spying, probably recording everything. Tara didn't respond. Now some marshal thinks she's a victim. I don't care who she says she is. She doesn't belong up here. Sam? Tara finally said. Let it go. Please. But Samantha's ego had taken the controls. And ego at 35,000 feet is a dangerous thing. I've been with this airline 15 years, Samantha snapped. I know trouble when I see it. Back in first class. Marcus crouched near a passenger, struggling with a laptop charger. Aaliyah glanced at him. Mr. Thompson, she said softly. He turned, surprised. Yes, ma'am. I appreciate your professionalism, she said. He nodded. I'm sorry. For all of this. I see it more than I admit. Aaliyah met his eyes. I know. That's why I'm documenting it. A pause. Then Marcus whispered. She's not done. Aaliyah raised an eyebrow. She's unraveling, he said. And when people like that unravel, they take everyone with them. 20 minutes later. Samantha returned with a tray of drinks. Her face was neutral mask reattached. She served rows 1 and 3 without issue. Then she arrived at 2A. Aaliyah looked up. Coffee? Aaliyah blinked. Samantha's hand trembled slightly. Cream sugar? No, thank you, Aaliyah said. A pause. Samantha didn't move. Ma'am, I'm trying to extend an olive branch. I declined. Aaliyah said. Firm but respectful. You've made your stance clear. The tray lowered slightly. I'm just doing my job. No, Aaliyah replied, folding her hands over her notebook. You're trying to salvage your job. Samantha's lips twitched, her mask cracking. Passengers were watching again. 1 in 3B began filming discreetly, but unmistakably. The pressure was climbing. Even the overhead vents hummed louder, as if the aircraft itself braced for what was next. Climax moment. Suddenly, Samantha leaned closer. You know, you people always think you can bend the rules. A beat of silence. Every word landed like a bullet in the quiet cabin. You dress nice, talk smooth, Act like you belong. But we all know what this is. And I'm not afraid of your threats." Aaliyah's voice dropped. "I didn't make threats." "Oh, please," Samantha hissed. "Your laptop. Your phone calls. Talking like some CEO. I am a CEO." Samantha scoffed. Of what a startup blog, Aaliyah pulled a card from her pocket. Black metal. Embossed. She handed it to Samantha. Samantha read it aloud, softly. Incredulously, Dr. Aaliyah Richardson. Founder. Richardson Technologies, Primary Holdings, Meridian Airlines Group. The blood drained from her face. Passengers leaned forward. Someone gasped. Samantha looked up at Aaliyah. Really looked for the first time. The elegance, the authority, the quiet, the composure. It wasn't an act. It wasn't theater. It was ownership. And Samantha had just insulted, profiled, and harassed the woman who owned her paycheck. Aaliyah took the card back, calmly tucked it into her clutch, and said, "The difference between us is that I don't need to prove who I am. But you just proved who you are in front of 27 witnesses and 3 cameras." And then she turned away. The silence that followed was louder than any scream Samantha could have imagined. Captain Hayes rubbed his temples inside the cockpit, listening to his headset crackle as the flight operations channel pinged for a second time. Captain Hayes. Be advised, FAA has flagged a passenger report under code Delta Red. He froze. Code Delta Red wasn't used for unruly travelers. It was for legal escalation involving corporate stakeholders, and it only ever showed up under 2 scenarios: internal whistleblowing or executive distress. "Source of report?" he asked. There was a pause. Then passenger ID matches. Executive-level clearance. Richardson. Aaliyah Richardson? Hayes blinked. Dr. Aaliyah Richardson. The name registered. The woman who'd quietly bought up Meridian Airlines stock until she held majority interest. The one who stayed out of the spotlight, avoided media, and never sat on panels. She'd been dubbed the silent CEO by Forbes. Brilliant, reclusive, and ruthless in restructuring underperforming sectors. And she was on his plane, in his first-class cabin, and one of his crew had, God help him, slapped her. His fingers hovered over the call button. Meanwhile, back in the cabin. Samantha sat in the galley, her eyes darting. Tara said nothing. The junior attendant had long since realized she was in the blast radius of a nuclear mistake. Marcus stood stiffly near the front curtain, waiting, watching. Samantha finally whispered, "She tricked us." "No," Marcus said. "You judged her. She didn't tell us who she was. She didn't have to." Samantha's lips curled. "You're taking her side again." Marcus leveled a calm gaze at her. "There is no side. You slapped the CEO of the airline. You've made it everyone's problem." 20 rows back, a couple in coach streamed the scene on TikTok. The video already had 18,000 views. Aaliyah was tagged. So was Meridian Fail, Flying While Black, and Samantha Chen. Trending. Spreading. Aaliyah knew it. She didn't initiate the attention, but she didn't stop it either. She glanced at the man across the aisle, who nodded with quiet support. "Whatever you need," he said softly. Aaliyah offered a single, appreciative smile. She wasn't just documenting this anymore. She was witnessing the collapse of a culture in real time. And this time, it wouldn't be swept under a corporate rug. Back in the cockpit, Hayes made the call. He pressed the secure line to the airline's Emergency Response Division. Within moments, the General Counsel of Meridian Airlines, Karen Ziegler, answered from corporate HQ in Los Angeles. "Hayes here. We have an incident on MA447, code Delta Red. Passenger identified as Dr. Aaliyah Richardson. There was a pause, then the rustle of papers, clicks of keyboards, and then Karen's voice. What's the status? She was struck. By a flight attendant. On camera. In front of witnesses. Silence. Hayes continued. She revealed her identity. Passengers are filming. One of our own air marshals witnessed it. Karen inhaled sharply. How long until you land? 70 minutes. Keep the aircraft stable. No further contact. Don't escalate. Upon touchdown, FBI will board. Legal is activating a crisis protocol now. Hayes nodded. Understood. As he cut the call, his co-pilot glanced over. This gonna be one of those weeks, no, Hayes muttered. This is gonna be the week climax moment. Suddenly, Agent Foster stood and walked calmly to Aaliyah's row. He lowered his voice. Dr. Richardson, legal at Meridian has been notified. Landing protocol has been initiated. Please be advised FBI, FAA, and corporate counsel will meet us at the gate. Understood, Aaliyah said. He hesitated, then added, There's one more thing. She looked at him. Internal dispatch from Meridian has already started cross-referencing past crew complaints. Your name just triggered a full audit alert across 3 departments. Aaliyah closed her laptop slowly. The machine had been activated, not because she pulled strings, but because the structure itself recognized her authority. The airline's protocols were hers, its policies, its playbook, and now it was working for her. Silently. Surgically. Samantha didn't know it yet, but her name had just been flagged, her file unsealed. Her history poured across internal review dashboards. In 70 minutes, she'd go from senior flight attendant to the most infamous cautionary tale in the company's history. Marcus stood in the narrow space between galley and curtain, his face tight with restraint. He had seen racial bias countless times in his 15-year career, but this was a landslide. And the worst part, it had always been building stone by stone beneath the surface of the airline. Until now the earth was cracking open, and someone was finally watching. Samantha Chen, back in the galley, whispered into her phone. Tara's a wreck. Marcus turned on me, and I swear that woman Richardson or whatever has been recording everything. Her voice trembled with desperation. Tell HR I was provoked, that she was aggressive, that she threatened me. On the other end of the line, her union rep. Brad sighed audibly. Samantha, there's video. What kind of video? Multiple angles. Passenger uploads. One from behind your jump seat. One from 1A, all time-stamped. Samantha's voice broke. They were filming me. No, Brad replied. They were protecting her. And that's when Samantha finally started to understand she wasn't the victim. She was the evidence. Meanwhile, Agent Sarah Martinez, the second air marshal on board, tapped her tablet discreetly in row 17D. She had already requested metadata from passenger footage. One file stood out 8 minutes long. Recorded from row 3, it captured the entire lead-up to the slap audio included. She queued it up, headphones in. Samantha's tone, her words, the racial edge, the moment her palm struck Aaliyah's cheek, the gasp, the silence, the shock. Agent Martinez closed her eyes. This wasn't misconduct. She whispered. This was a federal hate crime. In 2A, Aaliyah Richardson was calm. Too calm. Her legal team back in San Francisco was already working through protocols. Her media strategist had sent a proposed holding statement, just in case the press got wind early. But the real firepower, Jennifer Walsh had just forwarded a file labeled Archive, Samantha Chen Incident Reports. Aaliyah's eyebrows lifted. Inside were 17 prior complaints: rudeness, profiling, disproportionate bag checks. One internal case where a black mother and daughter were asked to re-verify their boarding passes twice mid-flight because Samantha thought they switched seats. Every complaint had been marked, resolved with internal coaching. Aaliyah shook her head. Not anymore. Not. Marcus finally approached her seat again. "Ma'am," he whispered, "there's something I think you should see." He handed her his phone. A saved voicemail. Aaliyah raised an eyebrow. "It's from a previous flight. Samantha didn't know I was still logged into the cabin intercom. She said something. It was ugly. I kept the file." Aaliyah listened. Samantha's voice. "Honestly, I don't get why they even fly these people in first. You know they'll complain about everything, then act like victims." A pause, then laughter. From another crew member. Aaliyah stopped the playback. "This wasn't just one bad moment," Marcus said. "No." Aaliyah replied. "This was a pattern. One they ignored." Climax moment, Captain Hayes emerged from the cockpit. All eyes turned. He approached row 2 slowly, then crouched beside Aaliyah. "Dr. Richardson, corporate has authorized me to inform you that a full incident response team is assembling at LAX. FBI and FAA will lead deboarding." "Understood. I want to apologize. As captain, I take responsibility for what happens in my cabin." Aaliyah studied his face. "Do you take responsibility for what happens in your company?" The question wasn't personal. It was systemic, and Hayes knew it. "Yes," he said. "From this moment forward, I do." A beat. Then Aaliyah handed him Marcus's phone. "Start with this." Hayes listened. His eyes darkened. He straightened slowly. Then he pressed his intercom. "Attention crew. All communication is now official record. Flight MA447 is under incident protocol. All statements, behaviors, and actions will be reviewed by federal investigators upon arrival." The cabin went dead silent. Passengers glanced at each other. Samantha's eyes widened as the announcement echoed to the galley. She knew that tone, that phrase, official record. It meant nothing you say now can be undone. Samantha stood frozen, tray still in hand. She'd gone too far. And now there was a record. Samantha Chen's fingers trembled as she fumbled with the galley cart, hands slick with sweat. The hum of the engines behind her had become background noise to something louder. The silence of realization. The captain had just invoked official record status. The airline was shifting from protocol to legal containment, and she wasn't part of the containment team. She was the liability. In first class, passengers whispered behind partially drawn curtains. "She's the CEO. I heard she owns the airline. My friend just texted. The story's already on Reddit." One woman was crying softly in seat 4C. She was traveling with her biracial son and had been watching everything unfold with a mixture of horror and quiet vindication. She looked at Aaliyah like she was watching history happen in real time. Meanwhile, Marcus stood still, his face blank as Samantha returned to the front of the cabin. "You knew who she was," she hissed. "Didn't you?" "No," he said. "But I knew what you were." Her breath hitched. "Excuse me." "A liability," he replied. Back in the cockpit, Captain Hayes received an encrypted file from corporate, subject Samantha Chen, complaint history plus unsealed internal reports. He scrolled. 17 prior complaints, 5 from black passengers, 3 from Hispanic passengers, 1 from a disabled veteran. The reports were like bricks, each one manageable on its own but stacked. They formed a wall of corporate neglect. He turned to his co-pilot. They buried this. Who, everyone? Agent Martinez moved silently down the aisle. Stopping at 3A. "Ma'am," she said to the woman recording, "I appreciate the footage. Please send a copy to this secure address." The woman nodded. She didn't even try to hide it. She didn't have to. Martinez replied, "Until today." Aaliyah sat quietly in 2A, eyes scanning her laptop. The metrics were updating. Video views 118,000 and rising. Tweets mentioning Samantha Chen 14,000ers. Stock alerts Meridian Airlines down 6.8%. She wasn't cheering. She wasn't gloating. She was preparing. Climax moment. Then it happened. As the cabin dimmed for descent, Samantha reappeared this time, shaking. "Dr. Richardson," she said, forcing professionalism into her cracking voice, "I'd like to apologize for everything. I didn't know who you were." Aaliyah didn't move. "You're right," she said softly. "You didn't. But I do now," Samantha insisted. I let stress get the better of me." Aaliyah finally looked up. "This isn't about stress," she replied. "This is about pattern, prejudice, power you thought I didn't have." Samantha's eyes darted to Marcus, then to Agent Foster, now standing nearby. "You've made your complaint," she said, her voice rising slightly. "Do you really need to ruin my life over one mistake?" One passenger's stared. Marcus stepped forward. Samantha stopped, but she didn't. "Fine. You win. I'm the villain. She's the victim. Is that what everyone wants to hear?" Aaliyah stood slowly. Her voice was even, controlled, but sharp enough to pierce through the entire cabin. "No, Samantha. What everyone wants to hear is the truth, and you've spent your whole career avoiding it." Silence. The slap had been loud, but this was shattering. Samantha staggered back. The reality finally struck. This wasn't just the end of a shift. It was the end of her identity. Captain Hayes pressed the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly at Los Angeles International Airport. Please remain seated. Upon arrival, the aircraft will be met by federal authorities. Do not exit or interfere until instructed." A ripple moved through the cabin. Samantha looked at the floor, her hands, and finally, she sat in the jump seat. No words, no bravado, no authority. Just a woman who had built her power on prejudice and watched it collapse at 35,000 feet. The seatbelt sign pinged on with a soft chime, but the mood inside Flight MA447 was anything but calm. From the moment Captain Hayes announced that federal authorities would be meeting the aircraft, tension took root in every passenger's spine. Phones slipped into stealth mode, heads turned, and all eyes, first class and coach alike, began shifting toward 2A. They didn't know her name yet, but they knew what she represented, something seismic. Aaliyah closed her laptop and slid it into her carry-on. Not because the flight was ending, because a battle was beginning. To her left, Marcus stood at attention, his jaw tight with a pressure he'd been swallowing for a decade. He had spent 15 years trying to survive quietly in a system designed to ignore people like him, and now he was watching the entire system start to tremble. "You good?" he asked quietly. Aaliyah nodded. "We're just getting started." Samantha Chen, still strapped into her jump seat, watched the ground rise up through the tiny oval window. The tarmac of LAX gleamed in the late morning sun, ironic, considering it felt like Judgment Day. Her face was pale. Her lips were pressed in a thin line. She was no longer muttering apologies. She was calculating, scheming, bargaining with a future that had already slipped through her fingers. And she didn't even know the full truth yet. Climax moment. As the wheels screeched against the runway, two vehicles were already pacing beside them unmarked, low profile, government tinted. Inside the cabin, the passengers knew something unusual was happening, but most still thought this was just a bad customer service incident, an overreaction, a slap, maybe, a confrontation. They didn't yet know what this was. They didn't yet know who this was. The aircraft taxied to Gate 42B. Then it stopped, but no doors opened. Captain Hayes stepped out of the cockpit and walked into first class, flanked by Agent Martinez and her partner. "Agent Foster, Dr. Richardson," Hayes said, keeping his voice low and respectful. "Are you prepared for what's about to happen?" Aaliyah stood, slowly adjusting her blazer sleeve. "I've been prepared for this my whole life." Passengers craned their necks. The front cabin door opened, and a blast of sunlight spilled into the jet bridge. Waiting there were two FBI agents, one LAX federal air marshal, and a camera crew from a local affiliate who'd somehow been tipped off. A microphone clipped to a reporter's collar sparkled in the light. Then Marcus stepped forward. "Permission to exit with Dr. Richardson." "Granted," said Hayes. Gasps erupted across the cabin as Marcus and Aaliyah walked out together, flanked by federal officers. Not escorted. Escorted like dignitaries. Like leadership. Like power. Samantha tried to stand up. "Wait, what's going on? Why are they escorting her?" Agent Foster turned to her. "Please remain seated." "Ma'am, I was the one who got threatened." She called lawyers. She made phone calls during the flight. He glanced at his notes. "You mean the phone calls to Meridian Corporate Headquarters, Legal Department Personal Assistant Samantha paused. How do you know who she called?" The agent raised an eyebrow, because she wasn't calling to complain. She was calling to activate crisis protocol. Crisis, what Foster leaned forward. "You don't know who she is." "Do you?" Samantha's mouth opened, but no sound came. Back in the jet bridge, Aaliyah's phone buzzed. A single text from Jennifer Walsh. Press conference confirmed. Full media alert prepped. Crisis plan, stage 3 initiated. Aaliyah exhaled, then looked at Marcus. "You ready to speak the truth?" He nodded. Behind them, the sound of the cabin doors closing again echoed like a vault shutting on the past. Flight MA447 was no longer just a plane. It was now evidence, as the plane emptied under federal oversight. Rumors flew. "She's a lawyer." "No. I heard she's an inspector." "No, she's from corporate wrong." "Wrong. Wrong." The woman in 2A wasn't from corporate. She was corporate, and the industry about to learn her name. Agent Sarah Martinez had handled high-profile incidents before, but as she reviewed the timeline in her notes and watched the press flood the terminal beyond Gate 42B, she felt a chill. "This isn't just a civil disturbance," she muttered to her partner. "Agent Foster, we're walking into something systemic." Aaliyah stood beside Marcus in the glass-walled holding lounge reserved for dignitaries and VIPs, not typical passengers. But nothing about her situation was typical. She was quiet, almost too quiet for someone who had just been physically assaulted mid-air. But beneath that calm lay a fury honed by years of boardrooms, acquisitions, and discrimination endured in silence. Outside the security glass, the FBI regional director, Meridian Airlines crisis team, and federal transportation officials were assembling like chess pieces on a grid. Then the moment came. Agent Martinez approached Aaliyah. "Dr. Richardson," she said carefully, "I ran your name through our federal clearance database. There were multiple encrypted red flags tied to national tech infrastructure contracts. May I confirm your full identity and role?" Aaliyah didn't blink. "I'm Dr. Aaliyah Richardson, founder of Richardson Technologies, holding federal defense and healthcare AI contracts. And I'm the sole majority owner of Meridian Airlines through 4 shell corporations registered in Delaware and Singapore." Marcus's eyes widened. Agent Martinez froze. And every assumption that had governed the last 2 hours crumbled. Climax moment. In the adjacent room, Samantha Chen sat with a federal public defender, watching the terminal TV screen as footage from the aircraft leaked online. A still frame of her raised hand, Aaliyah's calm face, a stunned Marcus. Then the reporter's voice overlaid. Still no official confirmation. But inside sources now say the passenger who was assaulted on Flight MA447 is not just a frequent flyer, but the billionaire owner of the airline itself. Samantha stood so quickly, her chair fell backward. No, that's not possible. She lunged toward the door, but was stopped by an agent. "Ma'am, sit down. You're being held under federal supervision pending investigation. You don't understand," she pleaded, turning to her attorney. "That woman, she's not the owner. She can't be." Her attorney didn't reply. He'd already seen the live press feed, too. Back in the dignitary lounge, Meridian's CEO Michael Stevens arrived, his face white, suit askew from the rushed flight. He saw Aaliyah and stopped mid-stride. "Dr. Richardson," he said, stunned. "I didn't know you were on board. We weren't informed. No one was supposed to know," Aaliyah said. "I travel anonymously on purpose. To observe." Michael looked like he might throw up. Agent Martinez turned to him. "You are Michael Stevens, CEO of Meridian." "Well, Mr. Stevens," she said, handing over a printed report. "You'll want to see this passenger 2A. Your company's owner was assaulted by a flight attendant with 17 prior discrimination complaints." Stevens swallowed hard. "I want everyone in HR on call," he said, turning to his assistant. "And legal. All of legal." Now, the press conference loomed. The terminal pulsed with energy. Dozens of journalists were now aware of the identity leak. Security barricades formed quickly. As Aaliyah stood behind the curtain, her executive assistant, Jennifer, handed her a clean printed statement. "You don't need to say much," Jennifer whispered. "Just enough to let the public know who you are, and that change is coming." But Aaliyah didn't read the paper. She folded it and placed it in her coat pocket. "I've waited years for this moment. I'll speak from truth. That's enough." The curtain parted. Flashes popped like lightning. A hush fell. Aaliyah stepped to the podium. One visible mark on her cheek still faintly glowed under the lights. "Good morning," she began, voice smooth as velvet, iron beneath. "Yesterday, I was a first-class passenger. I was also a woman, a black woman, and I was assaulted." Gasps in the room. But what my attacker didn't know, what many of you didn't know, was this: I'm not just a passenger. I am the owner of Meridian Airlines. And what happened to me is part of a larger problem that ends today. She paused. Cameras clicked. I've come to speak truth to power because I am power, and I intend to wield it. The crowd roared. Samantha's name trended nationwide. In the minutes after the press conference ended, a strange stillness descended on the Meridian Airlines executive floor. Not the silence of peace, the silence of calculation. CEO Michael Stevens stood behind the tinted glass of the 42nd floor boardroom, looking down at the city like it might hold answers. It didn't. His mind reeled with what he'd just witnessed. Dr. Aaliyah Richardson, his company's shadow investor, board silent partner, and supposed absentee owner, had just flipped the industry on its head. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't raged. She'd declared war without even uncrossing her arms. "Where's legal?" he asked. His assistant looked pale. "In the war room. They've already been contacted by the DOJ, Civil Rights Division." He closed his eyes briefly. It was already happening. Elsewhere in the building, Meridian's PR director watched the trending hashtags skyrocket. Meridian assault. Flying while black slap. The owner airline awakening. Every major outlet was covering it. Not just the slap, but the insidious microaggressions that led to it. A black woman in first class. A flight attendant with a history. 17 prior complaints. Ignored. Dismissed. Misfiled. Now national shame. Meanwhile, in her private holding room, Samantha Chen sat stone still. The TV played muted coverage of Aaliyah's calm, commanding speech. Owner of Meridian Airlines. Pattern of racial profiling. Demands industry-wide accountability. Samantha stared at the screen with an expression too stunned for remorse. She wasn't crying. Not yet. Because she hadn't fully grasped what she'd lost. Not just a job. Not just a career. An entire identity. She'd built her authority on the assumption that people like her got to define the rules of first class, of behavior, of belonging. Now the very rules she enforced had shattered, and the person she thought she'd put in her place owned the place. In the corner of the boardroom, Marcus Thompson sat across from federal investigators. He was no longer afraid. He was calm, firm, factual. "I tried to intervene," he said. "I did. But I've been silenced before. When I reported similar behavior, you're saying this isn't isolated." Marcus looked them square in the eye. "It's a pattern, one we've allowed to grow." He slid a file across the table notes he'd kept. Quietly. For years. Dates. Names. Incidents. Outcomes. Cover-ups. It wasn't vengeance. It was proof. Climax moment. Later that evening, Aaliyah stood alone in her hotel suite overlooking the skyline. Her cheek was healing. The fire inside her wasn't. She scrolled through texts. Hundreds. Thousands. Messages from CEOs, activists, employees, allies. Some afraid. Some inspired. Some finally ready to speak. And then, one message blinked. From the Secretary of Transportation. "We'd like you to testify at the upcoming Civil Rights in Aviation hearing. Nation needs to hear your story." She didn't hesitate. Yes. No dramatic music. No spotlight. Just a quiet decision in the dark. A war strategy forged from silence. Because Aaliyah knew the storm wasn't coming. She was the storm. It began before sunrise. 3 unmarked black sedans pulled into the underground garage of Meridian Airlines corporate headquarters. Inside them, federal investigators, compliance auditors, and a forensic data team tasked with one mission: crack open the company from the inside. By 6:30 a.m., Servers were being imaged, email records archived, personnel files reviewed for patterns. The word was out. The DOJ wasn't just investigating a slap. They were investigating a system. In a corner office 3 floors up, Meridian's chief legal counsel, Jordan Tate, was already sweating. He'd spent the last 5 years dismissing internal complaints as isolated misunderstandings, PR patches, confidential settlements, a whisper here, a memo there. But now the whistleblowers were coming forward, and every dismissed complaint was a fuse he had lit with his own hand. His phone buzzed. Incoming subpoena, civil rights violation filings, immediate compliance. He dropped his coffee. At that same moment, in a sunlit conference room in Washington, D.C., Dr. Aaliyah Richardson sat across from Senator Valerie Monroe, chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. "Dr. Richardson," the senator said, pressing record on the microphone between them. "Tell me what you saw." Aaliyah didn't blink. "I saw my airline. My legacy fail the very people it was meant to serve." She slid a folder across the table. Complaint summaries. Patterns of targeting black passengers for extra security. Disparities in seat upgrades. First-class denials. Biased hiring practices. Lack of executive diversity. This wasn't about one employee. Aaliyah said, it was about an entire culture designed to make some passengers feel like intruders in spaces they paid to be in. Climax moment. Meridian HR implodes. Back at HQ, the head of human resources, Patricia Long, entered her office to find 3 federal agents waiting. "Ms. Long," one said, "we have questions about how your department handled discrimination complaints, particularly 17 tied to Samantha Chen." Patricia's voice trembled. "We handled each one formally based on policy." One of the agents interrupted. "We reviewed your policy." Most complaints were downgraded from discrimination to customer service discrepancy. 4 were closed with no follow-up. 2 complainants were removed from Meridian's frequent flyer program. Why she opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The silence said enough. Across town, Samantha Chen faced a different reckoning. Out on bail, banned from commercial airline employment, and awaiting arraignment for federal civil rights violations. She was now the target of more than public rage. Civil suits were piling up. 3 former passengers filed against her personally. 4 employees came forward with stories of her workplace bias. But the most haunting blow, a letter slipped under her temporary lawyer's door. Stamped in gold and blue. "You are hereby permanently barred from entering the premises of Meridian Airlines or contacting its employees. This is a final notice. Signed by Dr. Aaliyah Richardson, owner." Meanwhile, Aaliyah wasn't celebrating. She was building. At her temporary operations suite in D.C., she brought together a new team. Civil rights advisors from the ACLU, aviation ethics experts. Marcus Thompson, reinstated and promoted to head of in-flight culture and safety. And her most trusted confidant, Jennifer Walsh, now head of industry reform strategy. "This isn't just about Meridian," Aaliyah told them. "It's about rewriting the DNA of every airline that ever made someone feel less than 30,000 feet in the air." Dramatic end of Part O Secret. Meeting at midnight. That night, in a discreet executive villa outside Los Angeles, 6 top board members of Meridian met in secret. One leaned forward. "She's destroying the company." Another shook his head. "No, she's saving it, and saving us from ourselves." A silence followed. Then the oldest member of the board, Harold Dwyer White, silver-haired, the longest-serving airline exec in the nation, spoke. She gave us a choice: reform or ruin. We chose denial. Now she's choosing what we wouldn't. Truth. He stood. I suggest we follow her. It started with a press release. Simple, stark, irreversible, effective immediately. Meridian Airlines will initiate the most comprehensive civil rights audit in aviation history, but what followed was seismic. By 10:00 a.m., United Aero Group, Skyline Jet, and Atlas Air each issued rushed Me Too statements. We stand with Meridian's commitment to equitable skies. We will be reviewing internal bias protocols. We condemn any form of discrimination and support industry reform. Translation. They were terrified because Aaliyah Richardson hadn't just called out injustice. She'd mapped it, named it, documented it, and now she was putting it in front of regulators with receipts that every other airline feared she might have on them too. Climax moment: Congress reacts. At Capitol Hill, Senator Valerie Monroe received a dozen calls before lunch from airline lobbyists, from shareholders, from CEOs who never thought they'd need diversity consultants until this week. But Monroe was unmoved. She drafted a bill that afternoon, the Equal Skies Act. Mandatory unconscious bias training for all aviation personnel. Independent passenger discrimination review boards. Real-time reporting dashboards for in-flight complaints. Executive bonuses tied to civil rights performance metrics. We're not asking airlines to change, she told a CNN reporter. We're telling them. Inside the boardroom, Meridian's staff fractures at Meridian HQ. The ripple was more violent. Michael Stevens, CEO, stormed into his office and slammed the door. She's hijacked the brand. He snapped at his assistant. But Patricia Wong, CFO, was already reading the tea leaves. She hasn't hijacked anything. She replied, she's returned it to its rightful owner. And just like that, the balance of power tipped. Within 2 hours, 4 top executives submitted early resignations. 12 middle managers requested transfers, and the company's legal team filed an internal resolution. All remaining leadership must complete civil rights compliance certification or face immediate review. Unexpected allies elsewhere. Voices from outside the industry were rising. Reverend Darnell Hayes, civil rights icon, gave a blistering speech on MSNBC. A woman tried to travel quietly and instead uncovered the loudest truth in the sky. Black excellence is still treated like a boarding mistake. Lupita Nyong'o, Ava DuVernay, and Shonda Rhimes tweeted in support, triggering a viral wave under the hashtag #SheOwnsTheSkies by nightfall. Aaliyah's name had appeared on a short list for Time's Woman of the Year, but she wasn't celebrating. She was reviewing contracts because she had bigger plans. Dramatic turn. Airline alliance on the edge. The Global Aviation Council, the most powerful airline alliance in the world, called an emergency summit in Zurich. Their concern. The Richardson effect. Already, 2 member airlines had seen mass cancellations due to passengers sharing past racial profiling experiences online. One CEO demanded her blacklist. Another said they should ask her to speak. The room split, until the head of European operations stood. She's not just changing airlines, he said. She's changing the rules of altitude. And we're either going to fall behind or get ahead. Aaliyah's quiet strategy. Back in Los Angeles, Aaliyah sat with Marcus Thompson in her Reform Command Center. Have you seen the article, he asked? She nodded. It was the Wall Street Journal, The Quiet Billionaire Who Changed the Skies. Aaliyah didn't smile. They still don't get it. This wasn't about being a billionaire. It was about being a black woman in first class and still being told to prove I belonged. She turned to the whiteboard, filled with maps, statistics, and one word at the center: legacy. The cameras rolled before the microphones warmed. It was standing room only inside the House Subcommittee on Transportation Oversight. Reporters lined the walls. Activists filled the rows. Executives sat stone-faced in reserved seats behind little brass nameplates, blinking beneath the fluorescent lights like they were the ones on trial. But the person at the center of it all, Dr. Aaliyah Richardson, sat calm. No briefcase, no legal team, just a single spiral-bound folder and the fire of an unstoppable story. Chairwoman Valerie Monroe called the hearing to order. This session will investigate racial discrimination in commercial aviation, she said into the microphone, focusing on the incident involving Dr. Richardson and one of her own employees during Flight MA447. She paused. What we learn today may define passenger rights for the next generation. The buzz in the chamber dropped to silence. Aaliyah rose. Not a twitch of emotion. No makeup covering the last faint traces of that slap. She wanted them to see it. Remember it. Not as a wound, as a witness. Thank you. Madam Chair, she began, voice clear and measured. On May 12th, I boarded my own airline under a different name. I'd done this before. I believe a business can only be understood at the ground level. That day, I experienced what too many others have suffered: targeted suspicion, humiliation, and eventually physical violence. Flashbulbs snapped. I wasn't mistaken for a threat because I was unruly. I was profiled because I was black and in first class. Climax moment. Marcus takes the stand. After Aaliyah, Marcus Thompson stepped up, once nervous, now resolved. He adjusted his tie and nodded toward the committee. I've worked 12 years as a senior flight attendant at Meridian. I was on that flight. I watched the discrimination escalate. I tried to stop it. But the truth is, I should have spoken louder. Sooner. He looked down, voice cracking just slightly. I apologize to Dr. Richardson and every passenger I didn't protect. There was a pause, then applause. Soft at first, then rising. Chairwoman Monroe banged the gavel. Order. Please. This is a hearing. But even she couldn't hide the hint of a smile. Enter Samantha's name. An assistant passed a folder to Monroe. Ms. Richardson. This committee received testimony from multiple employees detailing a long-standing pattern of biased behavior by flight attendant Samantha Chen. 17 formal complaints. None escalated. We also received your company's internal HR documentation. Frankly, it's alarming. Aaliyah nodded. I have initiated an internal systems audit, but I also welcome external oversight. Do you believe this incident is representative of a larger issue? Monroe asked. Yes. Aaliyah answered without hesitation. And not just at Meridian. This happens across the industry. It doesn't start with a slap. It starts with a look, a tone, a question that says, "You don't belong here." Dramatic twist. Airline execs are called out suddenly. Rep. Jamal Ortiz turned to the row of seated CEOs behind the witness table. We've heard from the victim. Now let's hear from the ones who allowed this culture to fester. He pointed. Mr. Delaney from Skyline Jet. Your airline has 5 unresolved complaints matching the Meridian pattern. Mr. West from United Aero, you settled 2 racial discrimination cases last year, but listed them as conduct matters. Gasps rippled. Delaney fumbled for words. West cleared his throat. "We're initiating internal reviews. Rep." Ortiz didn't blink. Too late. Reform is no longer voluntary. Climax close. The bill is announced. Chairwoman Monroe held up a stack of paper. This is the Equal Skies Act. It requires annual civil rights certification for all aviation personnel, federal audits of passenger complaints, and legal penalties for willful negligence. She turned to Aaliyah. "Dr. Richardson, would you consider helping us lead the implementation task force?" A hush fell. Aaliyah spoke simply. "I didn't ask for this role, but I accept it, because the sky doesn't belong to one race, one class, or one gate. It belongs to everyone." In a small courthouse on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Samantha Chen sat in a defendant's chair, wearing a navy blazer 2 sizes too big and a face drained of certainty. It was arraignment day. Federal charges, assault aboard an aircraft, civil rights violations, obstruction and false statements. The courtroom buzzed with journalists, bloggers, and even 2 documentary crews. Her name wasn't just in headlines. It was a warning label. Outside, protesters gathered some waving signs that read, "Accountability in the skies." Flying while black shouldn't be dangerous. She slapped Power, and Power slapped back. Samantha's lawyer whispered, "Say nothing. Look remorseful. Let the process work." But the truth was, the process had already worked. Social media had tried her. News anchors had analyzed her. Former co-workers had disavowed her. And now, justice was writing the final draft. Climax moment. The public statement. After court, Samantha walked past the cameras and stunned reporters and paused. She didn't have to, but something in her broke open. "I made a mistake," she said, voice trembling. "A massive, unforgivable mistake. I let my bias speak louder than my training. I thought I was protecting the cabin. I wasn't. I was harming it." Flashes. Shudders. Audible gasps. She continued, "I didn't know who she was. But that doesn't matter. You shouldn't have to be a billionaire to be treated like a human being." The next morning, her statement aired on Good Morning America, CNN, and even BBC World News. Some said it was too late. Some said it was a PR stunt. But others, especially victims of discrimination, said something different. She finally saw herself. Meanwhile, Aaliyah watches. Quietly from her office at Meridian's Crisis Center, Dr. Aaliyah Richardson watched the footage alone. No commentary, no smugness, just a long breath. Then she hit pause and whispered, "Now the real work can begin," because she understood something deeper than revenge. Transformation wasn't about one courtroom. It was about an entire system finally being exposed. Systemic cracks spread wider. In the days that followed Samantha's hearing, 5 more airlines issued formal reviews of bias complaints. One airline, Northern Air, suspended its entire executive team after discovering similar HR cover-ups. The Department of Transportation created a new Division Office of Aviation Equity and Compliance. It had one mission: ensure that what happened on MA447s never happened again. Back to Samantha, the collapse accelerates. Samantha returned home to find her apartment vandalized with red spray paint. Racist. Her bank account frozen pending civil litigation. Her union considering expulsion for violating code of conduct. But the worst was a voicemail from her estranged mother, Samantha. "I raised you better than this. How did you become this person?" She dropped the phone, because beneath the courtroom shame and media firestorm, a question had begun to burn in her mind. Was this the first time? Or just the first time she got caught? Climax close. The settlement offer. Her lawyer returned days later with a grim offer. The DOJ is offering a plea deal, 18 months. Federal no early release, followed by 3 years supervised bias education work. Samantha swallowed hard. They want me to teach. No, Chisan, he said. They want you to face the very people you harmed. Every week, every month, every word on record. A pause. Do you accept? She nodded slowly, because maybe, just maybe, facing the mirror was better than running from it. In a glass-walled conference room 10 floors above downtown Los Angeles, Dr. Aaliyah Richardson stood before a digital whiteboard filled with the kind of plans that didn't just solve problems. They rewrote futures. The Meridian Airlines Civil Rights Reform Task Force, handpicked by Aaliyah herself, was in session. No lawyers, no PR specialists, no empty executives trying to save face. Just a diverse group of experts, activists, frontline workers, and federal officials, gathered under one promise. We don't patch systems that profile. We dismantle them. Aaliyah's opening slide. A simple phrase, no more first class for hate. Beneath it, policy principles. Bold, concrete. 1. Real-time reporting. Independent review panels. Bias audits quarterly. Passenger Advocacy Office. 5. Zero-tolerance enforcement. Mandatory empathy training. Public transparency dashboard. One of the FAA liaisons muttered, "That's ambitious." Aaliyah didn't flinch. So was aviation. And we conquered the sky. Climax moment. The Passenger Advocacy Office. At the center of her reform was one radical idea. No more passengers pleading with gate agents. No more complaints routed to customer care limbo. Instead, a federally protected passenger advocacy office with direct authority to intervene in discrimination cases on the spot, with hotline access, surveillance review rights, and the power to issue immediate crew suspensions. Someone asked, "Won't the unions fight?" That Aaliyah answered simply, "Let them. I've been in boardrooms with billion-dollar egos and no empathy. They didn't scare me either." The blueprint goes public. By the end of the week, the full policy package was uploaded to a new site, equalskies.org. It included sample employee scripts for de-escalation, real stories of Black passengers who'd faced profiling, an open letter signed by over 200 industry insiders who'd once stayed silent. The downloads were instant. The views over 3 million in the first 48 hours. And among the first commenters, "I'm a gate agent in Newark. Just finished the new empathy training. Cried twice. Thank you. As a flight attendant, I thought I was helping people. This helped me see how I'd failed them. I work for Samantha's old airline. This gave me the courage to report what I saw last year. HR is finally listening." A dramatic turn stock market's react analysts had warned Aaliyah that going public would tank Meridian stock. But now, after the congressional hearing down 12%, after Equal Skies launch recovered 8%, after public endorsements from major allies up 17%, not because investors suddenly grew a conscience, but because they saw something more powerful than PR public trust reborn. Meanwhile, the first academy opens in Phoenix, Arizona. Meridian's first Flight Crew Equity Institute opened its doors. It wasn't just a training center. It was a rite of passage. Every new hire, every manager, every pilot, every member of the C-suite, all required to complete a 40-hour bias recognition, de-escalation, and restorative justice certification. Its name, Gate 1, because that's where it always begins. At the gate, with a glance, a tone, a decision, and now with accountability. Climax close. The youngest trainee steps up during the first Gate 1 graduation ceremony. A 22-year-old new flight attendant stood to speak. Her name was Kendra Owens. Her voice shook slightly, but her words didn't. My grandmother was told she wasn't allowed to fly to her own brother's funeral because her clothes were too plain for first class. I just finished training that would have protected her, and I'm going to make sure it protects every black woman who walks onto my plane. The room went silent, then rose to its feet, back in Aaliyah watched the footage on her tablet. One tear slipped down her cheek, not from pain, but because the blueprint she'd drafted had started building itself. The classroom was colder than it needed to be. White walls, no windows, rows of metal folding chairs. In the front row sat Samantha Chen, her once pristine uniform now replaced by a plain gray blazer and court-issued name tag Chen S. Beside her, a former bus driver dismissed for harassment. Behind her, a hotel manager caught on video denying entry to a black family. This wasn't a lecture. It was the first mandatory cohort of the National Civil Rights Reconciliation Program. And for Samantha, it was the first time she'd truly been asked to listen. The instructor, a calm black woman named Elena Ford, opened the session with a slide. Bias is a lens you don't know you're wearing until you try to take it off. Elena didn't raise her voice. She didn't lecture. She asked questions. And for Samantha, every question landed like a stone in her chest. Describe a moment you misread someone because of their appearance. Samantha froze. Then slowly, almost unwillingly, her hand went up. There was a woman, black, first class, elegant scarf. Calm? She swallowed. I thought she didn't belong, and I made sure she felt that. No one spoke, but no one scoffed either, because confession, here, was the first step to change. Climax moment. Confronting the past on camera. 3 weeks into the program, participants were asked to record video testimonies, not apologies, but reflections. Samantha sat in the booth, facing a camera. No makeup, no edits, just truth. My name is Samantha Chen. I worked 15 years as a flight attendant. I believed I was fair, but I wasn't. I let fear and bias steer my decisions. I judged a woman by her race, and when she didn't flinch, I escalated. When she stood her ground, I struck her. She exhaled, because I thought authority gave me the right to control people, and it didn't. It gave me the responsibility to protect them, and I failed. That clip would later be used in training programs across the country. Meanwhile, Aaliyah learns of the testimony at Gate 1 headquarters. Marcus Thompson knocked gently on Aaliyah's door. "There's something I think you should see," he said, offering a tablet. It was Samantha's testimony. Aaliyah watched silently, her expression unreadable. When it ended, she simply asked, "Is this real?" Marcus nodded. "I think it is." Aaliyah's response, radical compassion. Later that evening, Aaliyah emailed her legal team. Request a transcript of Ms. Chen's full coursework and completion records. If verified, I'd like to consider her for a guest facilitator position at Gate 1 under strict supervision and review. It shocked her staff. "Are you saying she should teach one aide asked?" "No," Aaliyah said. "I'm saying she should show others what recovery from bias looks like. If she's doing the work, she deserves the platform." Samantha receives the message. 3 months into her sentence, Samantha was called into the office of the program director. "There's been a request," the director said. "Gate 1. They want to observe you lead a session." Samantha stared, stunned. Why? Because sometimes the best way to show others where the edge is to bring back someone who almost fell off it. Climax close. Samantha faces Gate 1. A week later, Samantha walked into a Gate 1 training room. The room was full. Flight attendants, airport staff, junior pilots. In the front row, Kendra Owens, the young trainee who had once spoken about her grandmother. Samantha introduced herself. "I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to show you what happens when you don't question what you've become." She spoke for 40 minutes about assumptions, power, the moment she slapped a stranger, the moment she learned that stranger owned the sky, and when she finished, the room was silent. Then Kendra stood up and said, "That's what accountability sounds like." The morning Samantha Chen gave her first Gate 1 session, the clip went viral within 24 hours, not because it was flashy, not because it was edited, but because it was real. I thought I was keeping order. I was enforcing a hierarchy I didn't even realize I believed in. Millions watched. Tens of thousands shared. And something strange began happening. Instead of pushing back, people leaned in. Every major airline calls Delta, United, Southwest, even international carriers, not with excuses, but with questions. How do we get your Gate 1 certification? Can Aaliyah's team train our trainers? Is she available for a board-level summit? In 1 week, Gate 1's consulting branch signed contracts with 5 airlines, 2 airport security firms, and an aviation tech company asking for custom-designed empathy modules. One CEO even said, "We spent $14 million on seat upgrades last quarter, not a cent on equity training. That ends today." Climax moment. The Senate hearing clip on C-SPAN. A senator held up a still of Aaliyah's cheek, faint red. Time-stamped. "This, right here," he said, "is the bruise that woke an industry up." The clip aired during a Senate hearing on transportation ethics. Across America, schools, nonprofits, and corporate HR departments began citing Aaliyah's case study. She wasn't just trending. She was becoming a framework. The laws begin to change. With pressure from the public and leadership from Reps. Alexandria Williams. The following legislation passed out of committee in record time. The Passenger Dignity Act. The Civil Rights in Transit Enforcement Bill. The Bias-Free Skies. Compliance Mandate. For the first time in history, a flight attendant's slap led to federal policy reform. And the irony, Samantha's recorded testimony was played on the Senate floor to show what acknowledgement looked like. Meanwhile, Meridian's internal revolution back at HQ. Aaliyah reviewed the latest reports. Complaints down 82%. Passenger satisfaction up 41%. Employee whistleblowing up, but so was response time and resolution. Marcus Thompson, now head of training, dropped off new feedback cards. "This is the first flight I've ever taken where the crew looked like America. The attendant asked about my comfort and meant it. Thank you for making us feel human again." Unexpected praise. A veteran speaks out. Retired General Charles Avery, a decorated Air Force leader and frequent flyer, wrote an op-ed titled, "I Didn't Cry in Combat. I Cried in 2A." He described watching the video of Aaliyah being slapped. "She took it with a stillness that broke me. That's not passivity. That's power. She didn't just stand up for herself. She stood up for my daughter, for every soldier's spouse who's ever been profiled at a TSA line. For the promise of dignity, climax close Aliyah declines a medal. The White House invited her to receive the Presidential Medal of Civil Merit. She respectfully declined. Not yet. She wrote, "Let's honor the outcome, not the outrage. When my reforms are industry standard, I'll accept." Instead, she requested the funding be reallocated to create bias training for the TSA. And while the world marveled at the reforms, Aliyah turned to her team with something far more ambitious. Let's take Gate 1 global. It began in a conference room overlooking Geneva. The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, had never seen anything like it. 12 airline executives, 4 heads of national aviation boards, 2 quiet observers from the United Nations Human Rights Council, and 1 black woman at the head of the table, Dr. Aliyah Richardson. No assistant, no entourage, just a slim portfolio marked with 3 letters, G1. Gate 1 was no longer just a division, it was now the standard. Meridian's internal reforms had inspired a blueprint, a codified, repeatable, enforceable system of bias recognition, de-escalation strategy, empathy response protocols, accountability infrastructure. And now, nations were requesting access. Climax moment. The Europe pivot. Air France, Lufthansa, and KLM had each faced their own discrimination scandals in recent years, but none had caught fire until Aliyah's story gave their employees a mirror. A viral French tweet read, "If she can own an airline, we can own our behavior." Within weeks, French regulators proposed a partnership. Translate the Gate 1 curriculum into 6 languages. Train 10,000 airline staff across the EU. Launch Europe's first passenger bill of respect. And Aliyah. She didn't franchise it. She licensed it for free in exchange for public transparency commitments. Back in the UEFs, transport hubs followed suit. Chicago O'Hare rolled out Gate 1 signage in all terminals. LAX introduced live bias response observers for passenger conflicts. JFK renamed its diversity center the Richardson Room. Aliyah refused every naming ceremony. "Put my name on systems, not walls," she said. Meanwhile, unexpected allies step forward. At a transportation tech summit, Elon Musk was asked what he thought of the Gate 1 model. He replied, "What Aliyah Richardson built is the OS update for human dignity. I'd fund it into space if I could." Elsewhere, Warren Buffett commented during a shareholder meeting, "We study companies that outlast storms. Gate 1 was the storm. And the lighthouse. Back at Meridian HQ, the real surprise." In a quarterly review, a young HR analyst flagged a new pattern. "Boss," she told Marcus, "we're getting reverse discrimination claims now." Marcus frowned. From who employees who used to think they'd never be questioned now being held accountable? "Some say it's unfair." Marcus leaned back. "It's not unfair. It's even. And even feels weird when you've lived above it." He smiled. "Let's make it feel normal." Climax close. The unexpected email. One night, Aliyah scrolled through inboxes. There, buried between government requests and keynote invites, was a name she hadn't seen in months, Samantha Chen. Subject line, "If allowed." Body, "I don't expect redemption, but if allowed, I'd like to contribute to your global program. Not as a speaker, as a helper. I'll stack chairs. I'll prep slides. I'll serve the vision in silence, if that's what justice requires." Aliyah sat still. She didn't reply immediately. She forwarded it to Marcus with a single-line monitor. If it's real, we build a roll. A month later, in a back room at a Gate 1 event in Toronto, Samantha stacked chairs, set out lanyards, answered no questions unless asked. She didn't speak during panels, but she listened to every word. And when a young white flight attendant approached her during a break and whispered, "I've been where you were," Samantha nodded gently and replied, "Then don't stay there." Gate 1 wasn't a campaign anymore. It was infrastructure, a machine of equity, a curriculum of change, a scaffold for dignity where flight, once a symbol of privilege, now became a field of balance. 5 years later, students at Howard University read about it in contemporary movements in civil rights. Chapter 7. The Richardson Protocol. A modern framework for ethical transportation. A simple diagram showed the moment that started it all. A first-class seat. A slap. A quiet woman who owned the airline. And beneath the image, the caption read, "From humiliation to revolution in 11 minutes. In Congress, the law becomes national standard." The Transportation Civil Rights Enforcement Act passed with bipartisan support. Key provisions: mandatory Gate 1 training for all commercial flight employees. Independent equity auditors required for all airlines with over 50,000 annual passengers. Real-time passenger reporting portals accessible from in-flight Wi-Fi. What was once Meridian's shame became America's pride. The Smithsonian adds her scarf. In the National Museum of African American History and Culture, Aaliyah's silk scarf, worn the day she was assaulted, is displayed under soft gold lighting. Beside it, her original travel notebook. Document everything. The system can only correct what it can prove. A school group from Birmingham stands in front of the display. One boy says to his classmate, "She didn't just change flying. She made people see." Climax moment. A seat that changed a nation. At the White House, the Oval Office briefing includes a standing item. Gate 1 compliance reports, quarterly update, and in every airline's first-class cabin, a new rule sits laminated in the seatback folder. No passenger may be removed from their assigned seat without documented cause. All complaints involving bias will be reviewed within 24 hours. The rule was nicknamed by staff as the Richardson Rule. Her final lecture at Harvard, Aaliyah was invited to deliver the closing lecture for Harvard Law School's Ethics in Leadership course. Her title, "The Moment After the Slap in It." She said, "I was not powerful because I was rich. I became powerful when I refused silence, when I demanded not just apology, but alignment, when I chose structure over spectacle." The students rose in applause, but one stayed seated, scribbling furiously. Later, she'd publish a best-selling book called Justice Infrastructure, its dedication to the woman who redefined turbulence. Meridian Airlines. The new gold standard. Once disgraced, now beloved. Meridian's transformation became the blueprint for crisis recovery. Employee diversity doubled in 5 years. 97% of passengers rated service exceptional in blind surveys. It became the first U.S. airline to receive the UN Equity in Travel Commendation, and its CEO, now Marcus Thompson, ends every quarterly meeting the same way: "If you can't serve with equity, you can't serve here." And Samantha. She never returned to flight, but she became one of Gate 1's quiet architects, writing modules for bias recovery teams and training ex-offenders in empathy facilitation. Her sessions aren't easy. Some cry, some walk out. But one note stuck with her. "You hurt someone powerful, and now You've helped heal people invisible. She framed it on her apartment wall. Climax close a statue. Unveiled on the 5th anniversary of the incident, the city of Atlanta unveiled a sculpture at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. Not of a slap, not of confrontation. A single bronze chair, 2A, slightly reclined. Beside it, engraved in steel. She didn't stand to shout. She sat, and the world rose. Aaliyah attended the unveiling in silence. No cameras, no interviews, just a quiet nod, and a hand rested on the back of that chair. In the quiet hills of Mendocino, far from boardrooms and press cameras. Dr. Aaliyah Richardson walks among cedar trees. No entourage, no headlines, just a hiking stick, worn sneakers, and a single-purpose reflection. It's been exactly 5 years, 4 months, and 9 days since the slap. The incident that made her a civil rights icon. The moment that nearly derailed her peace. And yet she doesn't speak of it often anymore. Because what mattered wasn't the pain of that day, but the progress that followed. Around the world, her impact breathes quietly. A transgender woman in Dubai cites Gate 1 protocols when filing a successful discrimination claim. A pilot in Nigeria reads the Richardson Rule during onboarding. A 10-year-old black girl in Houston dreams of running her own airline and tells her teacher, because Dr. Richardson did it. At her lakeside cabin, Aaliyah's inbox still fills with letters, not from CEOs, but from passengers. I was treated with dignity by a staff member who told me, every passenger, every flight, every time. I didn't cry until I got home. Thank you. My daughter was almost removed from a flight because of a ticketing error, but a young man intervened and said, "We don't profile. We problem solve." He told me he learned it from your story. They don't write to thank her power. They thank her pattern. The story retold, but never romanticized. When asked by a filmmaker to narrate a documentary called Flight Path to Justice, Aaliyah agrees, but with one condition. No slow-motion slap. No dramatized villain. Show the system, not the spectacle. In the film, her line becomes legend. I didn't make a phone call that day to retaliate. I made a phone call to redesign the air we breathe. Marcus Thompson, now CEO of Meridian and chair of the International Travel Equity Council, keeps a framed copy of the company's original bias complaint log. Above it, he's inscribed, "We used to ignore these. Now we build systems around them." He reminds every new executive, don't lead for applause. Lead for the people whose voices never made it into the cockpit. And Samantha Chen Shi volunteers twice a month at the Reform Through Storytelling initiative, where former perpetrators of bias speak to corporate teams anonymously. She never uses her real name. But one day, a young recruit asks, "During Q&A, have you ever seen real change?" Samantha replies, "I've seen it. I slapped a woman who owned the sky, and she used that handprint not to punish me, but to mark the doorway for change." Legacy in Motion airports now play a welcome message on Gate 1 certified flights. Welcome aboard. Your dignity is part of our flight plan. It's been translated into 38 languages. Even the FAA adopted her structure as mandatory training, naming it Policy R42 in silent tribute to her age the year it happened. And the final irony, Gate 1 is now part of NASA's astronaut prep curriculum. Because even in zero-gravity respect must hold weight. Aaliyah's final written words. In her best-selling memoir, Unassigned Seat, she writes, "I was placed in 2A. But I was never supposed to stay there. The system put me there so I could see what others couldn't. So I could feel what millions endure quietly. And then, so I could build the blueprint to make sure no one else had to. Justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wears a scarf, carries a notebook, and asks one brave question: why am I being treated differently? The sky didn't fall after the slap. It expanded, and from that open sky emerged something stronger than turbulent structure, legacy, equity, and a final message to you, the viewer. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch more gripping stories like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.